Expand your mind, don't let it wither and die. You'll find that it lifts your spirits high to the sky. So meditate.
Well, it's a pleasure to visit with you, and thank you for letting me share the inside Phoenix Lights story. It's been quite an adventure for the last, actually 28 years, because this all began for me 2 years before the mass sighting. We just celebrated our 26th anniversary. When my husband, who's also a physician, and myself, healthy skeptics, knew nothing about this topic at all, actually had a close sighting to our home. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley, very high on the mountain, overlooking the Valley of the Sun, they call it, and which is surrounded by mountains all the way around. And we have a panoramic view of the city skyline and the airport, Sky Harbor International Airport, so which is at a distance. It's about 20, 25 minutes from us. So we're very familiar with what planes and helicopters and streetlights and car lights and so forth look like. If anyone is by a computer and can get on the Phoenix Lights Network website, just Google Phoenix Lights Network, usually comes up first, and go on the photo page, you'll see the topography, because we do have quite a view. So anything that pops up out there that's unusual, we get to see. And one wall of our bedroom is a window, the entire wall. So if we're in the bedroom upstairs, usually whatever is out there that's unusual, whether it's a fire or something like a haboob, like a dust storm or so forth, we notice. At any rate, and there's a lot of coincidences, this isn't about me, this is about the data. And I love sharing the data now, because I say anonymous after thousands of people saw what I had been seeing for over 2 years before the mass sighting. And this was the start of it. It happened to be my birthday eve. I was taking a bath in a room adjacent to the bedroom when my husband, who was standing at the window, talking on the phone to my mother-in-law, who had called to wish me a happy birthday from back east. And he was on several state and hospital medical boards, so nothing ever ruffled his feathers. And suddenly he sounded really alarmed, and he says, "Oh my God, what the hell is that? Get over here quick." And I grabbed a towel, wringing wet, run to the window, and a little below us, and we're pretty high on the mountain, and it's a very private, gated area. So there is no way, and we're nestled in the mountains here, that it was military. It's about 50, 75 feet off of very treacherous desert flooring were 3 amber orbs in a triangle formation, pyramid formation, actually, one on top and 2 closely aligned underneath. And immediately it was like, whoa. And they were close. I mean, they were only 100 yards from our home. And I thought, well, my background, for anybody that doesn't know, I actually gave up a very accomplished medical career to pursue finding out what was going on, a logical explanation, which I have yet to find, concerning the Phoenix Lights. But my life's work for the last 50 years actually has been community education of vital health issues. I used to do health reporting for NBC and USA Cable, and started my own company in '85 called Health Education Learning Programs to get video and workbook curriculums into the classroom. So my passion is education of vital health issues. And certainly this is a vital issue, which I knew nothing about. But here I'm looking at these 3 orbs, and I'm thinking, whoa, I got to get my camera, but it was downstairs. My video camera was downstairs, and I didn't want to miss anything. Anyone out there who has had an anomalous experience that's just mind-boggling and extraordinary probably knows what I'm saying, because I tried to take everything in mentally. And it's always good to take a mental moment periodically of something that's important to you. And this seemed really important. I looked at the size, the shape, the color. They were about 3 to 6 feet each, depending on how close they were. And they were pretty close. They were oval shape, which is interesting, because the Nimitz Navy pilots that have come forward recently have talked about what they've been seeing, and they have video of it as Tic-Tac shape or oval shape. Now, I don't know if it's the same phenomena, but nonetheless, It was,
Now, sorry to interrupt. The ones you're seeing at this time, this is in 95. Is there any discernible definition to like a craft within the light or anything?
I'm getting to that. It's a good question. Immediately noticed there were three separate objects, very closely aligned. And I call them an orb because the light did not extend outside the edge. It was self-contained. And it was a beautiful amber color, a uniform amber color throughout, very soothing, very mesmerizing. Every other light out there, I noticed immediately, whether it was house lights or street lights or car lights, glared. These did not. They were very soothing. And I thought to myself, okay, if I don't get a picture of this, no one's going to believe it. And I collect sunsets. Anyone that's interested on my Facebook page, I have books of them because we have beautiful sunsets here. I keep a camera handy in the closet. So I go running to the closet and I said to my husband, if I don't get a picture of this, no one's going to believe it because it was that unusual. As I'm ready to grab the camera, he calls me back. He says, get over here quick. One of them is disappearing. And I always go back to this sighting because I saw this up close and personal. And as we both watched, the top orb, without budging from the other two, very closely aligned underneath, started to shrink very, very slowly, mechanically. It's difficult to express in logical terms, like a dimmer switch almost. It just started getting smaller and smaller and smaller mechanically, as if there was an intelligent presence behind it, until it was pea-sized and then disappeared. But it felt like it was still there. Where did it go? It was like cloaking, which I didn't even know that phrase is at the time. I jumped out on the balcony, which is perpendicular window to the big picture window, and took a quick picture of the two lower orbs. Now, if you go to the photos page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you will see the topography. The first picture is actually the view from part of our view from our home. You will see two lights at the bottom, which are car lights on the road. And I put that there purposely because, and this kind of answers your question too, the lights of a car reflect onto the road. This did not happen with the true unknowns. They were self-contained. Also, there's two mountain ranges in the background, the Estrella Mountain Range and a few miles back, South Mountain right behind the airport. And a few miles back is the Estrella Mountain Range. And there's I'll tell you this really cool story 6 months before the mass sighting. But at any rate, as I was on this balcony, looking at the two lower orbs, after I took a shot of it, and the second picture there, after the topography, is that second shot. Now, what's important about that first picture also is that to the right of the car are skylights at a house down the street. Significant because if you look straight up, that's exactly where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect, which is where these phenomena keep popping in. So you can see that in the pictures. And I always say the data speaks for itself. The data speaks for itself. Just look at it and it's there. And I'm the only one with 35 millimeter, by the way, which I have gone to extreme lengths to have analyzed and authenticated by military and university optical experts. And no one can give me an answer as to what these are. They cannot be explained or denied. They're in the negative. They can't be fudged as well. At any rate, the second picture there shows the two lower orbs. And you can see where they're positioned in that picture. And I immediately noticed an eerie silence as if time had stopped. It was just bizarre. And as I'm staring at these two lower orbs, and, I have to say this. I mean, I did not share this with a soul till 7 years later, or actually 9 years later, when I came forward. It felt like something was watching me. It just did. And going through my mind at that moment, I was thinking, who are you? What are you? Do you know that I'm here? I'd love to meet you. That's exactly what I was thinking. And the next thing I remember, the left bottom orb started to shrink, like the top one did, very, very slowly. And something told me to take a picture, and I quickly clicked a picture of that. That's the third picture on that row, the top row on the Phoenix Lights Network photo page. that was the only picture that turned out at the time. But for me, it was confirmation because it's right there. I happened to catch one, the left bottom orb half disappeared and one's still there. It's a miraculous picture, actually, because I was using a cheap Canon Instamatic camera and it showed up. But I didn't even know who to show it to. I knew no one who was into the topic at all. And I wondered for 2 years what this advanced technology, that's just what it felt like, advanced technology. I didn't know we had anything like this here on Earth, was. And periodically looked through the window, didn't see anything remotely similar to what I viewed on March 13th. On February 6th, 1995, until 2 months before March 13th, 1997. In January of 97, I came upstairs and I lied in bed. And like I said, if you're in that room and something pops up out there, you get to see it. And I noticed 3 huge balls of light for the first time, something similar to what I saw in 95 in a row. They were at a distance and they were huge balls of light. And I was staring at them for some time and I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute, they're amber, they're in a formation, even though it was a line formation, not a pyramid formation. They're hovering for minutes, strangely similar to 95. And I watched each one shrink again, seem to implode from right to left, and they were gone. Now, interestingly, everybody comes from a different background, from a different upbringing, from a different belief system. Some people can't deal with this topic. Some people don't want to, and that's okay. Everyone in their own time. But the data is out there. My husband, interestingly, he was inside while I was outside taking pictures. He wouldn't talk about it. He got agitated when I brought it up, which is, for me, it was like, what? This is like so miraculous and amazing. But he didn't want me to bring it up, so I didn't. But here I'm seeing these orbs at a distance, and I mentioned it to him. He said, do I still have to go to work tomorrow? That was his response. At any rate, the next night, he was at a medical board meeting. And I came upstairs and I noticed out of the sliding glass door that's perpendicular to the big window, the same 3 huge orbs at a distance were now in front of South Mountain in an equidistant line. And I thought, okay, enough. I'm getting video of this. So I go downstairs. I go outside. I got about 18 seconds worth. The battery goes dead and it was charged. I go inside, I plug it in. It's about 8 o'clock. I go outside, they're gone. About a half hour later, my husband comes up the drive. And again, we're pretty high on the mountain. It took him some time to get up to the home. And I went outside and I said, honey, remember I told you about the 3 amber orbs in a row last night far west? About a half an hour ago, they were right in front of South Mountain. As I'm pointing like this, they reappear in the same spot. And it was like, whoa, I got to get a picture of this. Now, again, I don't believe in coincidence. In video, which is being plugged in, doesn't do the lights justice. They're much smaller, they're white, they flicker, and could be mistaken for something else. But in 35 millimeter, they're there in the negative and they're amber. Okay. So I run upstairs, I grab my 35 millimeter, I get out on the balcony, I'm just ready to shoot the 3. When 6 pop up, massive span across, equidistant from each other, it was so unnerving that first picture of January 97 is wavy because I was shaking. It was that unnerving. It was so huge. And the first thought in my brain was, whoa, is this a mothership or a fleet? It was pretty extraordinary. But thank goodness I kept my wits about me and I kept clicking away. If you look at that series, the second picture, to me personally, is a smoking gun, because it's exactly what thousands of people would describe 2 months later during the mass sighting, which we're getting to, of 5 lights in a V, 1 big light here and then 2 on each side. And it seems like there's 2 underneath. Well, thousands of people 2 months later during the mass sighting would describe what they were seeing as 5 lights in a V with 2 trailing lights. It's there 2 months before the mass sighting. And as I'm shooting, as the bottom orbs are disappearing from 3 to 2 and 1, the top formation seemed to turn into a V. which was like, whoa, I mean, I got to get hold of somebody and tell them about this. I immediately, as the ones were disappearing underneath, called the Arizona Republic, which was our main newspaper here, and said there's some strange lights in front of South Mountain. And I knew they were in front of South Mountain because there's red blinking lights on the mountain to alert planes coming into Sky Harbor, which is just in front of South Mountain. And it was much lower than that. Get somebody out there quick and take a picture and tell me what it is. Finished my sentence, they were gone. Did not sleep well that night. The next morning, I wake up, I figured, you know what? This is ridiculous. There must be a logical explanation. First call I made was to the Arizona Republic. And the lady gets off, she gets right back on. And I try to be professional. My husband and I are both physicians. We live mountainside in Paradise Valley. We saw some strange lights in front of South Mountain last night. Is there anyone there that reported it? And she gets back on. She said, nope, nobody called. Now I know I called. So I said, we did see something unusual. It's probably a logical explanation, just trying to hunt it out. She says, well, sometimes Luke Air Force Base sends experimental maneuvers that they don't tell the public about. Maybe that was it. Sounds reasonable. So, well, Luke Air Force Base. Again, tried to be professional, told them the same thing. And the operator was very short. And she had an attitude, and she said, well, they didn't come into Luke Air Force Base, and we didn't come out from here, so we had nothing to do with it. And I said, well, be that as it may, my husband and I did see something together, very strange, and I got pictures of it. She said, you said it was in front of South Mountain, so maybe somebody saw something at the airport. Now it was a mission. I had to find out what these were. And I called the FAA. The gal was really sweet. And she said, well, maybe air traffic controller saw something. I said, oh, please, can you inquire? She comes back on. She says, actually, there was a group of air traffic controllers here last night that did see some strange lights that appeared over Class B restricted airspace. Now, there is a 30-mile radius around the center of the airport. Anyone that comes into that airspace, particularly 1,000 feet altitude that these were, must call into the tower. No one did. So anyway, I said, could you please get an air traffic controller on the phone that saw it if there's anyone there this morning that was there last night? She kept me hanging forever. Finally, this guy gets on, and I met him subsequently, really low-key guy. He was more excited than me. He said, you said from each other hovering information last night at 8:30. I said, yes, that's why I'm calling. He said, well, there were 3 at 8 o'clock. I said, I saw them too. They popped up at 8 o'clock. They looked on radar because they were alarmed. Nobody called in. Didn't show up on radar. And then they disappeared. When the 6 popped up at 8:30, then they really got alarmed because there were pilots that right there taking off and coming into Sky Harbor. It was over their tarmac. And he said that in his own words, there were 6 points of light, perfectly equidistant from each other, massive span, over a mile wide, that seemed to be attached to something, but they couldn't see what they were attached to, which you would hear again during the mass sighting. Some people saw craft, we'll get to that, but other people saw these lights that were totally equidistant from each other. They were either attached to something or had a force field holding them in rock solid formation. And he was also a meteorologist and a climatologist, and said that the entire thing turned as a unit against the wind. Very significant data. Elevated slowly and then moved in synchrony behind South Mountain. So I said, so what was it? And then there was silence. And then he said, beats me. I said, you're an air traffic controller. You're supposed to know it's in. They ruled out, he told me, they ruled out every conventional aircraft, balloons, Chinese lanterns, flares, as well as skydivers with lights. And they couldn't come up with anything. And these are professional sky watchers. We kept in contact up until and including March 13th, 1997, when thousands of people were outside purposely looking up at the sky for a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet, which was very clear in the northwest sky. When they also caught a glimpse of one, and we just heard a few years ago in 2017, at the 20th anniversary, we had a big conference in Oregon, that Peter Davenport, the head of the National UFO Reporting Center, announced that one of these objects from hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of reports that he received from witnesses themselves and drawings and all, one of these objects was 8 miles wide. Let me just think about that one. But we're talking about these orbs that either seemed attached to something, and some people saw these orbs actually detach from the main object, go out into the environment, and redock with it later, which to me was significant when I heard about this, because if you look at those pictures, again, the data speaks for itself. They're in the negative. From 95, the same exact phenomena is in the same exact location in the distance during our close sighting. So, some people did see these orbs detach. Why it would come outside our window is beyond me. But nonetheless, there were people that reported that. Other people reported that there were actual craft. And if you go to the GAP page on the Phoenix Lights Network website, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project, you will see beautiful illustrations by Larry Lowe and animations of these different craft, because after a 12-year study, hundreds of reports, 2 or more people had to see the same craft to be in the study. There were 10 different craft. Now, and they're different. I mean, if you look at them, their shape is different. Some are a V shape, some are a triangle, some are a boomerang, even disc shaped. And some had different number of lights. I mean, they're different. Now, whether it was one craft that could morph into looking different, or the perspective from where the person was actually standing, or a parade. And ultimately, that's what was decided by the investigators, that it was a parade because there were multiple things happening at the same time in different locations, and not just in Arizona. That's what's really interesting. There's one of the things that prompted me to come forward after 7 years of anonymity. There's so much misinformation and disinformation out there that it was so frustrating knowing that there was much more to the story, including the fact that the mass sighting itself, and I understand how the media just honed in on the 7 to 9 time period, because that's when most people were outside looking up at the sky at the Hale-Bopp comet. But it was much more far-reaching than that. On March 13th, 1997, beginning at 3 p.m., there was daylight sightings in Arizona. Very credible people are reporting these phenomena. 5 o'clock hour, Native Americans were reporting them in New Mexico. 7 o'clock hour and beyond in California. The 10, 11 o'clock hour, there were 2 commercial airline pilots, and I have the whole description in the book, that called into radar because they were actually reporting one of these massive craft was covering Las Vegas. And the sightings continued. 3 a.m. the next morning, there was an alleged crewman from Luke Air Force Base that called the National UFO Reporting Center. It's recorded, very professional, very detailed. We have part of that in the documentary, so people can hear it firsthand, stating that jets were sent out from Luke Air Force Base. And I've heard, some people say F-15s, F-16s, whatever, were sent out from Luke Air Force Base to intercept and get gun camera film, which I heard they did. I haven't seen it, but I heard from insiders that they did, of one of these craft that was hovering right over central Phoenix, 7th Avenue and Indian School, over a mile wide. And as they got close, this is significant too, because we're going to get into the technology, the light started to dim. And as it got closer, the entire thing blinked out and disappeared, freaking out one of the pilots who this alleged crewman said he helped out of his aircraft because he was so shaken up by it. And that Luke Air Force Base was on lockdown after that. So they were very, very aware at 8:30 what was going on. The sightings continued until 5:30 the next morning. The last sighting that I know of personally, I was told personally, from a Boeing crewman who was head of his department, was coming into work at 5:30 the next morning, and the whole crew saw one of these craft hovering over their tarmac. So we're talking over a dozen hours, over 4 states, at least, because we also have reports now from Texas and Utah and Colorado. It was a parade. And for many hours and over many states. In fact, we are doing a scientific study now, Phoenix Light study, to quantify the short-term and long-term effects of the Phoenix lights. And I'll get to that in a second, because just to finish up the technology, if I may, not only did people see these orbs detach from the main object and go out into the environment and redock with it, but it was slowly, very slowly gliding over people's heads, about 30 miles an hour. Some people saw it take off at blink speed without even dispersing the air. It was totally silent. That was what was eerie to people. As well as some people, and if you go to that GAP page, GAP, Geospatial Animation Project on the Phoenix Lights Network website, you'll see one of the craft split in two and shot straight up. I mean, we're talking about technology that we have not seen at all in 26 years. And certainly with the precarious nature of what's happening worldwide, you would think if anyone had this kind of technology, they would have showed themselves to show their prowess. At any rate, the technology itself was amazing, okay, to begin with. But when you talk about how it affected people, there has not been not one credible report, and I can't speak about other things, but I can about the Phoenix Lights, of harm, threat, or abduction associated with the Phoenix Lights phenomena. Can't speak for other things, but I can about the data that we've compiled, that I've compiled myself from talking to hundreds and hundreds of witnesses. They were in awe and in wonder, just curious. I mean, it's amazing how I just did an interview that's now streaming on the History Channel, History's Greatest Mysteries, with the host is Lawrence Fishburne from The Matrix. Fabulous show. It's streaming now on the History Channel. And they've been airing it quite a bit, by the way, because they got such a great response. It's a great show about the Phoenix Lights. And, you know, I describe it. People pulled over in their cars and got out to look. And we have people from all walks of life. I mean, military and pilots. And we have a pilot in the documentary that it went right over him. And he talks about looking in this cylinder of spinning energy. I mean, the descriptions were amazing. So on March 13th, 1997, at the time, and we hear so much threat, and harm from the military and Hollywood for so many decades, Dr. Gary Schwartz, who is the head of the Conscious Study Department at the University of Arizona in Tucson, makes a very poignant statement in the documentary. He said, if you are primed to fear something, how do you think you're going to react when you see that something? So Independence Day movie, the movie Independence Day, was very popular at the time. And I think it came out like 6 months before the mass sighting. And children who happened to see the giant, massive V of lights coming towards them would alert their parents and jumping up and down, Independence Day. But as it came closer, a calmness came over everyone, adults as well as children, a connectiveness to the phenomena that after it passed, they wanted to run after it or have their parents get in their car and chase it. It's amazing when you look at the data and see how these phenomena affected people in real time. People got telepathic messages, not to worry, not to be afraid. What's that about? And then long term, people went into the peace movement, people went into the environmental movement. It changed people forever. And one of the things that really blew me away is that a number of people had near-death experiences as children that was reawakened by the mass sighting. And that hit me hard because I did too. And I don't know if we'll have time to get into it, but I do get into details in the book. And again, it's not about me, it's about the data. But I thought, geez, could there be a connection between all unexplained phenomena, whether it's near-death experience, out-of-body experience, unexplained aerial phenomena, that have a mystical light associated with the experience. And lo and behold, when I started looking, just like the UFO, because I knew nothing about the UFO topic, when I started looking, I found such credible data. The Omega Project, which is this thick book by Dr. Kenneth Ring from the University of Connecticut, or Dr. John Mack at Harvard was studying this, and Dr. Bruce Grayson, he's a near-death experience expert, that indeed there is a connection between all unexplained phenomena, not just in the experience itself, which I lay out very simply in the book. Once I started doing that, I was like, whoa, I mean, this is like really similar, the characteristics, but the after effect, that's what was most profound. The awakening, the enlightenment, the connectiveness that one feels, whatever the unexplained phenomena. I started calling all unexplained phenomena UP and up, because the positive transformation was so poignant, so powerful, a connectedness to the universe, to the earth, to each other, that person probably has never felt in their lifetime, was so strong that it changed people forever. It wasn't a belief anymore that we're not alone. It was a knowing. There's a lot more to the story. I can tell you some cool coincidences that happened if you'd like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for sharing all that. It's this story in particular is very interesting to me because it's to me. I'll have to admit that I was a big X-Files fan growing up. I was a teenager at the time, and to me though, I've always been fascinated with this because the revelation of beings more advanced than us, from whether it's from another planet, whether it's from another dimension, whatever it is, would upend the very foundation of our belief system as humans, religion, and so much. And so I agree. I think it makes sense that there is an awakening, a feeling of connectedness, because, even Reagan, is famous for saying that, what would bring us together might be an alien invasion or something along those lines. And so I think that togetherness does make a lot of sense in that awakeness. One thing I want to get back to, just to touch on, is a little bit of the technology aspect of it. You mentioned about how it kind of sort of faded away or closed off. And you even used the word cloaking there, which I find interesting because, over time, there's been a long history of, since Roswell, especially, I think of this theory of reverse engineering, alien craft and alien technology. And, just the other day I saw an article where now we have a blanket that's a cloaking blanket that,
I read that too, yes.
Pretty much works the same way that, this is sort of described as not perfect, but it sort of is a reflection of what's behind it in a weird way, the way the light works. And so, it makes me, it makes me more suspicious, given the way the government has always been very secretive around these things and has had a lot of misinformation. I mean, from the Majestic 12 groups, NASA has had, there's footage of astronauts in orbit with strange movements around the sphere of the globe, around the Earth, that don't really make sense with the way things move. But then again, I'm somebody who also has never had a personal experience. And for me, I'm still a little bit skeptical. It's much like you said, like I believe that there's something and I want to believe, but I think I personally need that thing, because most of the time I see the videos and it's like you said, the videos just don't do it the credit. And it's very easy for people to be skeptical if they're afraid of this topic, because admittedly, again, it upends a lot of their maybe foundational beliefs about life and existence and everything else. I look at it like it just opens up a whole new world of possibilities that hopefully we don't mess it up. But what is some of your thoughts about, who to trust right now? Because there's a lot of information coming out some of it from the government, some of it from different individuals. Jeremy Corbell's very outspoken. He's worked with George Knapp, and obviously I've really dug into the Bob Lazar episodes, and honestly, I've seen him speak quite a few times, and it's pretty consistent. It seems very, very believable in many ways. But then again, I also think back to people like Bill Moore, who was, admitted to working with the government. And sometimes that makes me a little cautious, especially when I see a lot of ex-government people like Elizondo, Graves, Pope, Dolan, like all these guys are kind of coming out being advocates for it. And sometimes I'm a little hesitant to know whether or not they're well-intentioned or if it's a little misdirection. What are your thoughts on how to dissect all the stuff that's coming at us today?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's not an easy task. It's complicated because and I say the same thing about a sighting itself. I mean, you really, I'm a healthy skeptic. I really look for a logical explanation for whatever I'm seeing until there is none. And then, what do? It is what it is. But you really do have to be cautious and discerning and prudent and pragmatic in all of this, and, take what other people are saying or putting out there. And again, I deal with the data. The fact that I have pictures, I could not be sitting in front of you right now if, number one, I did not have 35 millimeter that have been, extensively through the whole last 26 years, analyzed and authenticated by military and university optical experts. And not one has come up with an answer. But there's other worldwide. In fact, I just got it. It was really interesting. I met with, years ago, a fella here from China, whose father was is one of the top physicists and UFO experts in China, wanted to meet with me to look at my data. And we had a briefing, and there were cameras and the whole thing. And his son translated. He didn't speak any English. Nicest man. And he actually showed me magazines. Other countries are so much more open to these phenomena as being real, as being, most call them otherworldly. And I'll get into how the story unfolded, which is really interesting in and of itself. Our own governor, who mocked the sighting in 97, came forward 10 years later to say he saw one of the craft. And in his own estimation, as an awarded military pilot, it definitely wasn't flares. The only explanation they ever came up with, and I'll get to that in a minute, because as the story unfolds, that's so fascinating in and of itself, talking about who to believe and who not to believe. But he showed me magazines that had pictures of the same exact phenomena, the Phoenix lights. And the word they always use, and our governor used, was otherworldly. Okay, and this has been going on. I mean, we can get into a whole discussion about the history of these phenomena. So when you look at that, and I had no idea, this has been going on since human documentation began. In primitive caves, long extinct animals are etched out in the cave, and in the sky, there's what we would call a UFO today. So they were seeing things then, okay? And then Sumerian writings in the Bible with Ezekiel's wheel, and then you fast forward to the 15th and 16th centuries, and we have frescoes and paintings of people on the ground looking up at the sky with, it looks like a UFO with a being in the UFO. Where did they get that idea, right? And then even fast forward more, and you have 100 years before our mass sighting, there was a mass sighting in Kansas, California, Washington, and Canada of what they called a massive airship with removable lights, okay? Think about that one. 6 years before the Wright brothers took flight. Okay. And then you fast forward again, and we have what they called Foo Fighters during World War II, which were these same thing, these orbs. In fact, Dr. Richard Haynes, who started NARCAP, where the National Aeronautics Reporting Center, where pilots, thousands of pilots have reported these phenomena, looked at my data and said that what my husband and I saw outside our bedroom window from those pictures is very similar to Foo Fighters during World War II, that were these orbs in rock solid formation that were flying around the aircraft, and each side thought the other side had this advanced spy technology. It wasn't until after the war that Japan and Germany and US tried to find out who had it. Nobody could. And then you fast forward again, and we have the big flaps in the 80s and 90s, and Hudson Valley and Lubbock, Texas, actually even sooner than that, and worldwide in UK and Russia and Belgium is an example of what should happen. They're a model for what should happen. They formed alliances with universities and scientists and civilians and military to try to find out what these things were. I mean, openly. Okay. And France as well, the Cometa report. So we have other countries that are much more open to these phenomena as being real and being unexplained to this day. No one can decipher. And thankfully, in 2017, for anybody that doesn't know is out there, there was a front page New York Times article that divulged that Harry Reid had funded a $22 million study of these anomalous phenomena, which they now call UAP, unexplained aerial phenomena, and that to date, and now military pilots and so forth, Navy pilots are coming forward, to date cannot be explained. They're not our adversaries. We've heard that. So it's really hard to decipher what other people are saying. You really have to look into it yourself and decide for yourself. And that's why I came forward, actually. After thousands of people saw what I had been seeing, it was really hard for me to accept, because I knew nothing about this, that there wasn't a logical explanation. I started keeping an intricate journal every single day of everything. I pushed my whole accomplished medical career aside to try to find a logical explanation, which to date I have not found. And, you know, looked at media reports and met with witnesses and really tried to study the data and the history of these phenomena. Ended up with a 750-page journal of such incredibly credible data. What do you do with that as an educator of vital health issues for 50 years now? How could I not share this vital issue? And I went back to work as the chief clinical consultant at the Arizona Heart Institute Wellness and Imaging Center, the heart test where you look at calcium in the heart vessels, and started editing down the 750-page journal just for fun, really. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I did not want to come forward. And I stayed anonymous, really anonymous, other than having a handful of people analyze my data. No one knew who had these pictures. I mean, these people were very kind to do that, by the way, and keep it anonymous. But I did not want to come forward. But here I'm finding out such important data that, you know, as a medical doctor, if I didn't know this stuff, most people probably don't know this stuff. And I got it down to 230 pages of every word is there for a reason, of such compelling information that ultimately, after much soul searching, it was like, okay, it is what it is. I'm just going to get it out there. People can decide for themselves. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. And that's going back to your question. I just let the data speak for itself. So that's kind of what you need to do. And especially once you have a sighting yourself and experience yourself, and most can be explained, by the way, only a small percentage cannot. But just because we don't have the technology yet to definitively define what these things are, it doesn't mean they're not real. I always say you may be looking on an AM dial for an FM frequency. So it's time we get this topic out in the open so we can talk about it and accept it and study it so we can move forward and find out not only who's driving these things, but move forward in our own evolution. And that's why I'm doing this study as well, because and anyone that's interested, that's either seen, and we have people worldwide that have seen similar phenomena to the Phoenix Lights, whether these orbs in different formations or actual craft, please join us because, and especially if anybody's out there that saw it on March 13th, 1997, because as a scientist, and I've really tried to go at this as scientifically as possible. Of course, there's some stuff out there that, you know, you just can't evaluate, although we look for repeatability in science. And if you look at my pictures, consistently, these things keep popping up where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. And there's an interesting story about this, which I'll tell you in a second. But as a scientist, I've tried to be as pristine with the data as I could. As a physician, I wanted people to know that they're not alone, that even though most anomalies can be explained, it's important to know that you're not crazy if you've experienced something that's unusual. And also that it's important to share. And I always offer people to either get in touch with me at the Phoenix Sites Network website or Facebook, Phoenix Sites Network page. And there's a lot to explore and consider on both of those fronts. Because just sharing with one person is cathartic. It's healing. And certainly I know, not only as a physician, but as an experiencer myself, it's very healing to share. And then, of course, as an educator, how can I not share this data? And I really thought about sticking it in a drawer and showing it to my grandchildren years from now, and they're all really into it, by the way, and asking them what they thought. But in good conscience, I couldn't do that. And finally came forward, particularly, and I'm going to go back now, 6 months before the mass sighting. And I'm going to, in the time we have, tell how the story unfolded, if I may, because it's really fascinating in and of itself. 6 months before the mass sighting, I was invited to present my substance abuse prevention education program to the Gila Bend, Gila, Gila Bend Indian Reservation, which is in the basin in between South Mountain and the Estrella Mountain Range in there, very sacred ground. And they don't talk to outsiders, but I helped out the principal. And I noticed after the mass sighting that these phenomena keep popping up right in that area where South Mountain and the Estrellas intersect. So I called him up and I said, did anybody happen to see strange lights on March 13th? And he started to giggle. And I said, is that funny? And he said, are you kidding? We've been looking up at them for centuries. We call them sky people, light beings. It's part of their culture. I had no idea. That was the first I had heard of it. And this is significant data, by the way, because number one, I had no idea that cultures, indigenous cultures worldwide, are very open to these other intelligences, not only out there, but visiting us. And the Hopi, among others, right here in Arizona, have protocols to invite them in. Many think that these orbs are spirit world or ancestors coming to give them knowledge and comfort and guidance and inspiration. And I have to admit, I've been inspired, if you can't tell. I'm very passionate now because it's so compelling and interesting. And he said, that's how the Estrellas got its name. Estrella means star in Spanish. And either they saw these things or it was the lore, gateway to the stars. And they believe that there's a portal or gateway in that area. And again, dealing with the data, if you just look at it, these phenomena keep popping up in that area. So, I leave it up to the individual to decide if there's a portal or gateway, but they certainly think that there is. And as the story unfolded, here's another little coincidence. A couple of weeks before the mass sighting, it was getting a little ridiculous. My husband was like, why are you going out every time that these lights show themselves? And I stayed in contact with the air traffic controllers as well during all this. And again, the scientist in me was like, I got to get this on film. So he was getting very annoyed. So I thought, okay, got to find out what's going on. And this is how close I was. A friend of a friend had a neighbor who had a friend who knew the past president of MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, which I had never heard of at the time. And I called him up and I said, I'm seeing these lights. He hadn't heard about it, but there were other people that were seeing it as I was and documenting on film. In fact, one of them, Steve Blunter, invited MUFON up to his balcony the night of the mass sighting, and they caught this arrowhead of 5 lights. It's spectacular. I mean, just look at it. These lights are attached to something or have a force field holding them in rock solid formation. His video and my video are before 10 o'clock. There are 2 boomerang videos after 10 o'clock. We'll get to that, which is significant. At any rate, I said, and I have this picture from 95 that I know is authentic, but I would love someone of credence to take a look at it and tell me what it is. He refers me to a field investigator, MUFON field investigator, for the following Wednesday. who calls me on Tuesday to say the then state director wanted to be at that meeting, but his mom had passed on Saturday. The funeral was Wednesday morning. Could we postpone? It was like, oh, geez, I am so busy for another 2-3 weeks, but I have a little window of opportunity on Friday morning at 10 o'clock. He said, fine. I knock on his door. He opens the door. The first thing he says to me is, did you see the mass sighting last night? And I was like, whoa. I said, I saw something similar to what I had seen and told you about 2 months ago. In fact, I called the air traffic controllers first thing this morning because it seemed like the same thing in the same location. They confirmed that it was 1,000 feet altitude over Class B restricted airspace, same phenomena. And a couple of pilots called in. One commercial pilot who was on departure said, what the hell are these lights over me? So we're talking about, right over the tarmac. And a private pilot on approach to Sky Harbor, which I'll get to later. Didn't say the name, but mentioned it. And he says to me, while NBC was coming to interview him in a half hour, I said, whoa. I said, first of all, I did health reporting for NBC in Philadelphia in 76 and in the early 80s in Phoenix. And someone might recognize me. This is not about me. And I don't know what we're dealing with here. Is it a hoax or military or whatever? But take a copy of my video, share it with whoever. I'm out of here. And I left. Now, I didn't know if the news was going to cover it or not. Okay. I mean, he said there was a mass sighting. I didn't know what that was about. At 4:00 that afternoon, the next day after the mass sighting, I'm sitting in front of the TV with the VCR ready. And how they do breaking news now? Breaking news, every news station was showing my video. He gave it to everyone. It was exciting because, I just wanted people to see what we saw. I didn't know what they were. And by 9 o'clock, a couple other videos came forward, including the boomerang videos, which were like, whoa, this is some massive boomerang video. So I thought, whoa, something's really going on here. And that's the following week, I didn't know what to do with what I had. And I certainly didn't want to come forward at that point. I didn't know what we were dealing with. And the following Tuesday, again, this was big news here for a while, locally. You see my video on TV again, and they're interviewing an investigator at a big Village Labs color computer lab in Tempe, right near Arizona State University. And he was showing, and that's the first I heard of it, showing pictures, because he also on the side analyzed videos and pictures from around the world for like a couple decades at that point, from Belgium and UK and Russia, of the same exact phenomena in those countries. So I was like, whoa, this is happening worldwide? I had no idea. And as the story unfolded, which was really interesting, and I'll try to condense it for you real quickly. After the mass sighting, again, this went right over people's heads, rooftop level. Some people said they could have thrown a rock at it. It was that close. And yet there was no investigation, no explanation from the military or government. In fact, when asked, they said, what? Something happened on March 13th? And it wasn't until May, months later, that the only elected official that ever came forward at a council meeting, Frances Barwood, councilwoman, and she was vice mayor of Phoenix at the time, asked innocently for an investigation. She was plastered. The ridicule and snickering and discrediting that was going on in the 90s and late 90s and early 2000s was rampant. I was so happy to stay anonymous. She was plastered to the wall. They made jokes in the newspaper. It was really awful for people that came forward with just what they saw and just wanted an answer. And then, and that kind of put a lid on things for a little bit. Then on June 18th, 97, for whatever reason, there was a front page USA Today article that opened our mass sighting up for the very first time to people outside of Arizona, worldwide. And we didn't have social media at the time. And yet overnight, it went viral. Every morning show, national morning show, Peter Jennings, Dan Rather, you name it, was talking about the Phoenix Lights. And what made it really interesting is that reporters from worldwide would talk to the witnesses. Their stories were so detailed and so heartfelt that they too were saying, why isn't there an investigation? Why isn't there an explanation? The very next morning, after nothing for months. We get a public announcement that then Governor Fife Symington was calling an unscheduled press conference for that afternoon to reveal the culprit of the lights over Phoenix. And we were ready. I was excited. I mean, come on, tell me what it was. He comes marching out, one of his aides, with a giant alien head costume and made a mockery of it. But to those that saw it, including myself, it was not a joke. And I then called every military base that month after. I called every military base and tried to get as high up as I could to find out what they knew and to just get their reaction, feel for their reaction. They were more curious about what I filmed. They wanted me to meet with them, which I would not, than giving an explanation for it. In fact, I have several conversations in the book, which some are quite comical. One higher up said, well, the only one that knows that did this is God and whoever did this. And it was like, what? Anyway, I get a call a month later, July 24th, from one of the heads of PR at the Air National Guard. And she says, oh, Dr. Lynne, I think we know what those lights were back in March. And I was thrilled. I mean, okay, tell me. She says, do you believe in all these months, no one ever looked at the log for visiting Air National Guard? And the Maryland Air National Guard was in town sending off military illumination flares in Operation Snowbird, quote unquote, which here we think snowbirds are coming in from all over the United States. We call them snowbirds. But in reality, in military terms, it means diversionary tactical maneuvers. So they may have been sending off flares to divert attention away from the true unknowns, but there's not one witness that I am aware of after all these years that saw the real true unknowns that have any of the characteristics of flares. Because I said to her right away, I said, well, wait a minute, when was the Maryland Air National Guard in town? She said, March 1st to the 15th. I said, were they in town in January? She said, oh, no. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely not. I said, well, my husband and I saw the same exact phenomena in the same exact location 2 months before the mass sighting. I actually got the video and pictures of it. And she says, you never told me that. And I said, besides, the air traffic controllers that I was communicating with said that it was over Class B restricted airspace over about 1,000 feet altitude. And she said, well, you never told me that. I never gave them details. And I said, and you're trying to tell me, and I educated myself to anything logical by then, including military illumination flares, that are dropped from aircraft on a parachute that drift haphazardly in minutes to the ground and have huge smoke trails that are illuminated by the flare itself and are heat seeking. I mean, they want the missiles that are going towards aircraft to hit the flare instead. Not one person described that. And I said, but are you trying to tell me that flares that cannot keep information for longer than a few seconds traverse the entire state in a rock solid, equidistantly spaced mile-wide V for hours? And she says, I have a call coming in. I'll get back to you. Well, I'm still waiting. In the meantime, it was like, whoa, something's going on here. Okay. And as we fast forward again, and again, I'm leaving a lot out. This is a 750-page journal. And now it's in its fourth print, by the way, because the original book is there, but I keep adding chapters as the story unfolds, including this. Right after the 10th anniversary, former Governor Fife Symington came forward bravely, for whatever reason, wanted to set the record straight, that he saw one of these craft after he mocked it in 97. And, again, in his own evaluation as an awarded military pilot, it was definitely not flares, and that the object itself was otherworldly. That's significant, otherworldly, the same word that other countries use. And then right after shortly after the front page New York Times article in 2017 that divulged that the military and the Pentagon were studying these phenomena, the private pilot came forward, and it was none other than, drumroll, Kurt Russell, the actor, who was on approach to Sky Harbor. Did you know that, by the way? Did you know it was Kurt Russell? On approach to Sky Harbor, close approach, his son who was with him saw this V and said, Dad, what is that? And he reported it. And his UK report interview, which is really great, is on our website. go on the news page and scroll down a bit. Also, which I don't want to forget mentioning, 3 years after the mass sighting, then Councilwoman Vice Mayor of Phoenix, Frances Barber, who was running for Secretary of State, on a platform to get answers for the lights over Phoenix and asking for a reenactment, which was brilliant. Okay, I'm a show me person. Show me. If it was military, shame on you for going right over people's heads and denying it. But nonetheless, show me. Right before the 3rd anniversary, we get a very public announcement that 3 Air National Guards were coming into town to show everyone the Phoenix lights. And we were ready. And if you go on that news page and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a block that says AZ Family. They were there. The media and the public were on ready. And they videotaped their attempted reenactment, which, talk about a joke. They tried to make a triangle was upside down. It fell apart immediately. It had huge smoke trails, just what flares do. To date, the Phoenix Lights has never been recreated or explained, and yet they continue to appear worldwide and affect people very profoundly. And that's why we're doing this study now, this scientific study. And if anybody does want to join us, please, that saw something similar. And we're talking about all unexplained phenomena are involved here, because we also ask questions about near-death experience and out-of-body and so forth. If you go on the Phoenix Lights Network website, www.thephoenixlights.net, or just Google Phoenix Lights Network, on the landing page is a triangle. And right underneath, you can either enter the website, and underneath that is the link to our study. Totally anonymous, totally confidential. We want people to be honest. And we're finding such incredible data from this alone, because we wanted to learn, quantify, and the real-time and long-term effects. Profound. It's just confirming everything that I have in the book, and even more. So I ask people to please, and we'll keep you posted when we're ready to divulge the findings, to please join us in this effort to get the most credible data compiled so we can show, because people aren't talking about that. They might, the military and government kind of focus on the threat possibilities and the fact that these are anomalous, which is great that that's out in the open now. But now they're just starting to look at, the civilian experiences. And sometimes they're the hardest, as you asked before, to evaluate and to decide if they were real or not. But nonetheless, it is what it is. And, that's why it's so important to study it and really get science on board to take a look at this credibly. And they are now. I mean, there are different groups popping up that are really taking this seriously. And that's a wonderful advance now to be able to talk about it and to get it out in the open. And again, that's one of the other reasons I wanted to come forward, not only to set the record straight, but to say it's time we talk about this and get it out in the open and address it and accept it and study it and move forward. So, that's where we are now. So I welcome people to go to the website, Phoenix Lights Network website, as well, because there's so much to explore and to really consider. And I'm also doing a couple of, we just finished, by the way, every year, and you can see behind me, this is our documentary, has won over a dozen international film festival awards. We just had a big event at the Scottsdale Harkin Shea Theater, sold out again since 2005 when it had the world premiere there. We've been sold out every year. We show the documentary and have speakers, and including Navajo Rangers who are studying these phenomena seriously. Travis Walton, who is an Arizonan, who is supposedly taken up in a craft, as well as witnesses that are just amazing when you hear from the witnesses themselves, and experts in the field as well in a Q&A. It was a wonderful experience. And also I'll be speaking next weekend on the 16th at the Glendale Main Library, if anybody's in that area. And then on the 27th of April, I'm so excited. I am actually kickstarting a new speaker series at the Arizona Boardwalk UFO Experience. It's an exhibit that's out of this world. I have to tell you, it's really fabulous. So anyone that's there, if you go on Facebook, I have the links to join us, please, because I'll be getting into the nitty gritty stuff we talked about here. I've been talking about for a while. There's other stuff behind the scenes that, real inside stories that I'm going to be sharing there, and just going with the flow and seeing what's next.
Yeah, no, I it's good to hear too that the data, and there's a more analytical approach to some of these more difficult assessments, because to your point, a lot of people that I have spoken with, I think I came into as a kid thinking about this as a physical ship. You see the little saucer in the poster, and that's what, you sort of conceive. But a lot of people I've spoken with have sort of talked about this being more of an entity type of visitation experience for them. And it when they describe it, it's sort of borderline. The first question I had, a friend told me this once in a story, and the first thing I asked him, I was like, were you on any drugs? Because it sort of sounded a little bit like a DMT sort of psychedelic sort of experience, but they don't typically do these things. So I said it sort of offhandedly, but they were very serious about it. And so I think there needs to be a broader view of the experience as well. So that's good to hear, and as we're wrapping up here, I think you maybe touched on it a little bit, but with all the disclosure and everything sort of coming out from, all these different sources, what do you sort of foresee as what may be next for us? Because a lot of people I've talked to, they sort of feel like we're sort of being fed little pieces bit by bit to sort of prepare us for something. Nobody really wants to say what, and maybe nobody really knows, but just what do you maybe see in the future here as this continues to progress and gain momentum?
That's another really good question, which of course is open-ended, because as far as the Phoenix Lights are concerned, and of course I focus mainly on that because I experienced it myself. I've been collecting the data for 26 years, and now we're doing a scientific study, and that's going to help, by the way, in that behalf, because you made mention, and that's one of the things we're finding out. I had no idea that people that have experienced these unexplained phenomena, these ups, not only near-death experience, and we do hear them coming back and seeing relatives and so forth, and other beings, some of them see ETs as well. But as far as seeing these phenomena, whatever they are, these UAP, it's touching one person at a time and waking them up. And not only is that happening, but the vast majority, which is blowing us away, I'm giving up a little bit of our findings here, and we've actually had over 800 participants in this, and we're like I said, we're looking for more before we close it off. Have seen beings, actual live beings in the flesh. Okay, whether they're of the flesh or these spirit beings or light beings. And we don't talk about that. We're only mainly talking in all these podcasts and all these other people about the hardware and about craft or about these orbs, which is great. Okay, to get to the next step, obviously, we have to acknowledge that we're seeing things. In fact, my very first presentation, and I was so nervous, was a month before I came forward in 2004 at the Tucson Medical Center with Dr. John Mack, who was a Pulitzer Prize winning psychiatrist from Harvard University. And he was writing a book at the time before his untimely demise in London when he was hit by a car 6 months later, about the connection between all unexplained phenomena, the possibility of interdimensional, okay, that people don't talk about that much, but it's one of the reasons, and this is another thing that we didn't get into today, but it's in the book. And also Dr. Bruce McAbee's 21-page report is on the website, is that he analyzed, an avioptical physicist, very well respected, because when we went back to the pictures of 95, I did discover I had more. And I put the first and the last picture on the website, and he analyzed those. And not only did the orbs move when I was outside, which I didn't notice, but they're in the negative, they're there in the picture. But the same exact phenomena is in the background. He noticed that as well, disappearing while the closed doors were disappearing. That's another point. But then he said to me, you said that sighting, the closed sighting in 95 was like 2-3 minutes. I said, right. He said, are you sure? I said, that's what I remember. He said, ask your husband. And he wouldn't talk about it. So I sat him down and I said, look, we don't have to talk about it, but what do you remember time-wise? He said, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 minutes tops. And what I share with you is what I remember. I don't remember the last light going out. I don't remember going inside. I don't remember looking at a clock. But anyway, he said to me, look at the skyline. I said, okay. From the first picture to the last picture, there's many groups of lights, not just individual lights, but groups of lights that are on in the first picture that are off in the last picture. He said, that doesn't happen in a couple of minutes. He said, I want you to do an experiment. Go out onto the balcony, and this is 3 years later. This was a year after the mass sighting this happened. And, take pictures and every hour, another night every half hour. I did another night every 15 minutes to see when these groups of lights go out. Well, I usually take a bath when we're home between 7 and 8. So let's be conservative and say 8 o'clock is a starting point. The first groups of lights started going out at 9 o'clock. The last picture is indicative of 10:30, 11 o'clock. And he says to me, can I present this case at the upcoming MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, International Symposium in 1999? And I said, hey, Dr. McAbee, this is your baby. I would have never, ever realized this data. Just keep my name out of it, which he was kind enough to do. He presented it in 1999, and I did not tell a soul until 2010 when the second edition of the book came out. As the first, and as far as we know, the only authenticated photographic evidence of missing time. There's a lot more to the story, and I get into that in the book as well. But at any rate, yes, there is much more to this story. And because these phenomena are so elusive, and I think, like you said, I mean, you were point on that from the late 40s, when we had the whole Roswell thing, and there were a lot of sightings, and the Robertson panel met, and we've heard about Majestic 12, where they decided that the modus operandi was to dispel any thoughts that it was, extraterrestrial. If the person still went on, they would debrief them and try to urge them not to come forward with their data. And if they continued, they discredited the person. I mean, that's been happening for decades, right? But at any rate, and for so many years, that's been going on. I mean, that's just the way it's been. Swamp gas and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's so much more to that story. But now it's out in the open. So hopefully we'll be able to learn more. But the Phoenix Lights, as I said, not only is touching one person at a time, which I'm trying to do. I mean, just look at the data, the book itself. And I had no idea when I came forward. I was at the Arizona Heart Institute. I was scared to come forward. And I had more doctors and nurses. And I know when somebody reads the book, okay? Because they really appreciated how my own transformation helped them transform to a good place, because I really have tried so hard to be as scientific and pragmatic with the data, and as credible with the data as well. So, hopefully that will help people that have had experiences that are real to them. That's the thing. Even if they can be explained, it's good to know that there's somebody there that they can talk to, or at least share. It is very healing. But the other thing is the message. And consistently, and we're seeing this with near-death experiencers as well as many of the UP experiencers or contact people, is who's ever doing this not only wants to wake us up to their presence in a very gentle, non-threatening way. That's important to state. Again, I can't talk about other things, but I can about the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. It's just consistent. But also, the message that people are coming back with is wake up to what you're doing to yourselves and your planet before it's too late. Why are people getting that message? And it changed people forever. I mean, like I said, it's not a belief anymore. We're finding that with the study. It's a knowing. People just know that this is real, that we're not alone in the universe, and that we have to wake up to what we're doing to ourselves and our planet before it's too late. And if that's not an important message to get out there, I don't know what is. So that's where we are right now. And each person can decide for themselves. That's why I lay it all out there. And, It's your choice. Okay. Some people can't deal with it. Some people don't want to, and that's okay. If people need, and there are some people, I still get that on Facebook, that still feed into the flare theory. It's like, are you kidding me? Just look at the data. That's all I say. Look at the data and then decide for yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really just, misunderstood science that we just don't have an understanding of yet. I don't know if you happen to catch, and I know you've got to go, but I don't know if you caught the last one of the Joe Rogans that had the last one with Eric Weinstein on it. But he really went into a long, and he's obviously a very intelligent individual. I have no grasp of what he's talking about on many levels, but it seems like the answers that we're looking for are lying somewhere in that, parallel dimension, understanding of how space-time works and how to, string theory and things at a microscopic, at a really small level. And so I think we're on the verge of really, I hope, having a greater understanding of these things. And I appreciate you being out there and sharing your message and your story with everyone as well, because it certainly helps further the dialogue on it. So much appreciated.
Well, and you hit on a couple of really good points. That's why I finally shared the missing time, because I wasn't going to share that. To me, I can't even get my head around it.
I think it's like the key part, like the space time to me. I keep coming back to that with the way they move, the way they're able to just disappear and reappear. It just, nothing else. I mean, I understand this anti-gravity propulsion concept, and maybe there is something to that. But then again, there also might be more. I hate to, I know I really do know you have to go. But I keep thinking back to, I think was it Paul Hellyer that came out and said like, there's basically multiple races, like among us, and so I don't know, maybe there's more than one vehicle,
Think about that. First of all, what I was going to expound on is that that's why I finally shared my missing time, because if there's other times and spaces along with ours, and again, we go back to this string theory and quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and bubble theory, then why is it so inconceivable that there could be other intelligent, sentient beings in those other times and spaces that we get glimpses of if we're open to them or invited? So, that's something to really consider, because even our oceans, that's one thing that's really hit me, because now that they're showing these Tic-Tac orbs, or whatever you want to call them, object coming in and out of the ocean with such dynamics, and propulsion that, it's just so way beyond, they could have been here for millennia. 70% of the earth are ocean. So they could be so deep and have that technology to be able to just get in there and get out there into space as well. Who knows? Like I said, there's so much more to the story. I came back, and I'll just leave this little tidbit from my own near-death experience, where I did meet beings. I'm just going to put that out there, which I felt have been with me and been my guide since I was 8 years old, with the thought that we are an experiment. That's another little thing that I'll leave you with. So there's much more to the story, and I hope people will delve into the book. Again, it's in its 4th print. They can get the book. The ebook I always recommend, because it has color pictures and live links for those that are into ebooks. It can be read on any digital device. But I kept adding chapters. It's in its 4th print now, as different people and different events evolve. The documentary can be seen free on Tubi, if you just download Tubi, which is free as well. And it's also streaming on Amazon. I also have which I think is amazing to me. It's the best thing that I did of all 3, is a graphic novel activities coloring book called The Adventures of Sue, F.O., Field Observer, and Hugh, H-U-G-H, Hugh, F.O., he's a little alien. And because I'm working on a curriculum as well for the classroom, but I got together a book of the best that I have compiled the last 10 years getting this curriculum together. And that's also on Amazon. And I can't keep them in my hand. I have a colored version and a black and white version. Whenever I'm at a conference or whatever, and people actually see it firsthand, it has the story as it unfolds of the Phoenix Lights. It has the 10 different craft to color in that are amazing, as well as 80 crop circles. And we learn about real ones versus man-made, and activities, word finders and crossword puzzles and all that, and the answers. And it's 160 pages. It's amazing. Little for all ages, by the way. I want parents and grandparents to be able to do it with their kids, and teachers, which a lot of teachers are using it in the classroom. So there's a lot of help out there if people want to learn more and grow as well, and raise their consciousness, because this is all part of it, an evolution, like I said, to get this out in the open so we can evolve to the next stage of human beings, hopefully, before we destroy ourselves, and be able to join our galactic brothers and sisters, because as you mentioned, I mean, so many people, and again, I just leave it open-ended, are now professing that, and I don't know how they would know for sure, but that the universe may be teeming with life. And we're just getting to that point now, like the flat earthers, to go that next step and know that, become part of the galaxy and our neighbors as well. So hopefully that happens soon, and it's a good thing. And I always think positive, because, like I said many years ago, actually, somebody asked me, are they a threat? Well, think about it. If they're so far advanced technologically, and we don't know spiritually, but technologically for sure, if they wanted to get rid of us, they would have a long time ago.
Well, that's what brings in the experiment aspect of it, right? As a potential, especially if you've read Zecharia Sitchin or any of that really, and yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, though. Yeah.
Exactly. If they're leaving it to us for our own destiny. So I'm happy that a lot of people are waking up, and I do hope that, because it is a very spiritual thing when people wake up and realize that we are spiritual beings with so much positive potential to make this world a better world. And we have such an amazing planet. Jim Delatoso, one of the investigators, when I asked him, why do they come here? He said, because it's a vacation planet.
It probably is.
Another fun coincidence. I'll leave you with this one. I actually was in professional musical theater before I went to medical school, touring since I was a kid, actually with Gordon McRae in Oklahoma and Betty Grable and Guys and Dolls. I understudied Barbara Eden, I Dream of Jeannie, music, and I did Alice in Wonderland, Mr. Jefferson, and a whole host of others. At any rate, did you see the movie Raising Arizona?
Yeah.
Coen Brothers, okay.
I love Coen Brothers movies.
I played the mother.
Yeah.
Don't say you recognize her. You're awfully mortified. Makeup to make me look like really geeky, but it was a great movie, and the cast was unbelievable. Many of them just getting started. Nicolas Cage had done a few, but Frances McDormand and Holly Hunter and John Goodman and William Forsythe. I mean, what a cast! At any rate, little coincidence here, which I didn't even realize until after I came forward in 2006 at one of the conferences. A guy came up to me, because by then they got wind that I had done Raising Arizona, which when people hear that, it's such a cult favorite. They don't listen to anything else. Yeah. But at any rate, a guy comes up to me afterwards. He says, there's a reference to your character in Raising Arizona and UFOs. And anybody that didn't see it yet, Nicolas Cage and Holly Hunter, it's a Black comedy. They can't conceive, so they decide to kidnap one of the Arizona quintuplets. And I played the mother. And after one of the kids was kidnapped by them, they had a press conference in front of our home. And one of the reporters, and I had no idea. In fact, the movie came out in 1987, 10 years before the mass sighting. And so I hadn't looked at it since the late 80s. And here it was 2006 or 7. And in front of our home, they're having a press conference, and one of the reporters sticks a microphone in my husband's face and says, "There's a rumor your son was abducted by UFOs. Is there any truth to that?" And my husband says, "Oh, please, son, don't print that. If his mama reads that, she'll lose all hope. which is totally opposite from my own Cape, nonetheless. The only reference to UFOs in the entire film, okay, which is a little interesting, 10 years before the mass sighting, but call it a coincidence. But what makes it even more poignant is the cinematographer, who was also just getting started at the time in 87, went on to do Big with Tom Hanks, and When Harry Met Sally with Billy Crystal, and How the West Was Won, and The Addams Family, and others. Also, you ready? Directed and created the Men in Black series, Barry Sonnenfeld, that opened, the very first one, opened in 1997, the same year as the Phoenix Lights. Coincidence?
Yeah. All that happened at the same time. You mentioned that earlier too, like Independence Day wasn't much before that. It's like, again, it just feels like, oh, preparation. You know, obviously it's all speculation on my behalf, but it does seem like, you know, there's some causality or, you know, some thought behind it.
For the last 70 years.
Absolutely.
So now, thank goodness, we've taken a step forward. So anyway, thank you. And I do hope people will go to the website. It has all the links to, you know, if you care to go on and read the latest edition of the book and watch the documentary. Again, Tubi, it's free. And also there's another, besides History's Greatest Mysteries, which is amazing. That is a great show. If people can tune that in, it's screening on the History Channel. And there's a number of good ones out there. But also I did an interview with William Shatner show, Unexplained, and that's actually airing for the first time. And I usually don't say it till I watch, because you never know what they're going to or how they're going to edit it. But that's coming out. I think that's coming out on June the 2nd. So, and, you know, probably be streaming as well after that. But hopefully that's about UFO hotspots. And Arizona certainly is a hotspot. So thank you for letting me share. And you know, hopefully it helped people get to the next phase in this, because it is important that people educate themselves and wake up to what's really happening. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today. It's been a pleasure.
And keep looking up. And that's a double entendre now, you know, and your audience knows what that means.
Indeed.
Keep looking up.
Indeed. Often in the cities, we forget to look up too often, which our ancestors used to do quite often. So yeah, much appreciated. Thank you so much for being here today.